What's up guys? In this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about the Army HPSP match process. So if you don't know, the match is basically when you get your spot for residency. So you're matching into a residency spot in a university or in some hospital and so on and so forth, okay? So usually for the civilian side, you match and you find out your results sometime in March, that's called the match day. For military, it's a little bit different in the sense that you find out a little bit earlier, but it's very similar, but you find out earlier in December where you matched, right? So it's two separate process and it's two separate applications, and the timeline is a little bit different also. So with that being said, if you are in a military HPSP scholarship in med school, you can still apply through ERAS, which is the civilian side, and the military match. You can do both for certain specialties, or you can just do the military match. But you cannot only do the civilian match and not do the military match. You could do both, but you cannot do only. Again, based on the specialties, and I'll go over that in a little bit. So just to kind of like give you somewhat of a timeline. So essentially around June 30th of the academic year of like your fourth year, you will get an email. So I'm talking about Army right now. So this is all Army stuff because I'm in Army HPSP. So I don't know if like the other branches have something similar, but this is only Army stuff that I've experienced through. So you'll get an email sometime so usually on June 30th. All right, so maybe end of June or on June 30th. And in this email, pretty much you'll have all the instructions of how the Army match is going to be. All right, so essentially instead of going to a portal like ERAS, you submit all the documents for the military match or the Army match either via email, all right, to this one office, or you can upload it into something called mods, MODS mods. But the issue with this is that most computers don't have access to mods. All right, and in general, the only way you can access to mods is by accessing it through a military computer. All right, so because of that, for most of you, you'll be doing your application submission through email. All right, and all of these documents, it will be outlined in this email. They're actually very good about exactly what they want and what they need. It's not much. And you will just email them or you upload it on mods by October 15th. So your entire application is due by October 15th. All right. Then by November 13th is when all the program directors, they're going to be meeting up in DC, and they'll like go through all the applications, and they'll kind of like have like a little talk, like a little conference setting for about a week, and they'll go through all the applications and they'll decide who's gonna be in which hospital, which location, and they'll pretty much match everybody in that week. And then you as the applicant, you'll find out on December 13th for where you matched. All right. Again, like all these dates, it's like a ballpark number, but this is the dates that I got from my match email for this year. And this year is obviously the 2023. So for the documents, essentially they want the MSPE, which will be submitted by your school. All right. And that's usually due by September 27th. They want your board scores, so that's your step 1 and step 2, or COMLEX 1 and COMLEX 2, and that will, you email that to this email that they'll say in this email, the email that you got on June 30th. Then you submit, and you will also email out your personal statement. All right, and that's usually a one-pager. They don't want anything more than one page. I've heard that if it's like a couple sentences over one page, okay, but the instruction is that keep it to one page. All right, they want your official transcript. It has to be sent to them. Either you will send it to them or it will go directly from the school. For me, it had to be directly from the school. All right, they want a letter of recommendations. And this also, it will be emailed directly from the author of that letter, directly from that person to the Army GME office. All right, so you have to give them the email addresses and everything so that they can do that. It's not going to go through the author to you to the office. It's got to be from them directly. Then they want the residency preference sheet, and that's pretty much which specialty you want and how you're ranking all the locations. All right, and lastly, they want your resume. So just to kind of reiterate that, so they want your MSPE, they want your board scores, they want your personal statement, they want your transcript, they want your letter of recommendation, they want your residency preference sheet, which is like an Excel file, and they want your resume. So that's kind of the whole thing. In my opinion, I think the military match system is way simpler, and I think it's pretty straightforward, it's pretty efficient, it's pretty easy than the application for med school. I've never logged on to ERAS, but I would imagine that it's even easier and simpler than ERAS. But that's just like my little guess here. So far, I have had no issue. When you email the GME staff for Army, they're very responsive. They're true professional. They're amazing. So I have no complaints at all. Now, let me just quickly explain to you what is Army sponsored versus civilian affiliated DoD VA site is. So you may not have to deal with it, but let me just explain it just in case you have to. So essentially, with Army, I'm only gonna talk about Army. With Army, based on the specialty, you may be allowed to train for residency at a civilian site. All right. If that civilian site or university, if it has an affiliation agreement with DoD, all right, then that site, it will be treated just like as an extension of a military training facility. Okay, so if that's the case, if they have an affiliation agreement with DoD, you don't owe any extra years. Versus, let's say you decide to do anesthesia, all right, and you got into a civilian site for anesthesia program that does not have affiliation agreement, you'll owe some extra years because you decided to go to a civilian site, not a military training facility that is not affiliated with the military or the DoD. All right. So when would this matter? When is this applicable? So every year in that email on June 30th, right? In that email, it will say which specialties the Army has a shortage of, and they're okay with giving you a Army sponsored choice, basically. Right. So what that means is that for example, let's say they want some more general surgeons, or they want some more anesthesiologists, or they want some more radiologists, right? They'll say, hey, we have X amount of spots in the military for residency, but on top of that, we need some more of these specialty physicians. So if you get into a civilian site, all right, it will be Army sponsored. What that means is that they will pay you, Army will pay you a full active duty salary of a captain with all the benefits and everything. You're in active duty when you're going to this civilian site, right, for residency, but in return you owe many more years. So this is called Army sponsored, and I'll explain the years, everything, right? That's Army sponsored. But also there are some civilian sites that is Army affiliated or DoD affiliated. So if you go to that site, even though it's a civilian facility, but because of the affiliation, you don't owe any extra years. So just treat that civilian site like an extension of a military training facility. So it's in a way just like a DoD facility, except it's a civilian site. You don't owe any extra years. So for example, I know for this year, they have this program allowed for anesthesia, for general surgery, for interventional radiology, vascular surgery, emergency medicine, and I believe that's all. And this kind of changes every single year. So in general surgery is 5 years of residency, right? So if I do 5 years of residency at a military hospital, after 5 years of residency of general surgery, I would owe 5 years as an attending, right? So all in all, 10 years. If I do a 5-year general surgery residency at a affiliated civilian site, like for example UT Houston, all right, residency there is 5 years. After I'm done with my residency at UT Houston, which is a civilian affiliated site, I would still only owe 5 years as an attending general surgeon in the Army. Again, all in all, 10 years. Now versus if I decide to go into an Army sponsored civilian site. So it is not a DoD affiliate, it is an Army sponsored. So let's say I do a general surgery residency at, let's say, NYU in New York City. that is not a Army or that is not a DoD affiliated site. So I'll do my 5 years of residency at NYU, but after that, and so instead of owing 5 years as a attending general surgeon, I'll owe 10 years total. Okay, uh, because I went to a site that is not affiliated with DoD. All right, so let's use another specialty as an example. So let's use anesthesia. So anesthesia in general, it's 4 years of residency, right? So if I do anesthesia residency, let's say at Walter Reed, it's a military training facility. I do 4 years of residency. After that, I owe 4 years as attending, 8 years total. I'm done with my obligation. If I choose to, I can get out of the military now. If I decide to do anesthesia residency at a civilian site that has no affiliation agreement with the DoD, right? So I'll do 4 years of active duty in that site, right? After that, I will owe 8 years, not 4 years, as an attending anesthesiologist to the military. So there's pros and cons to doing Army sponsored. The good thing is that if you're dead set on a specialty and for some reason you either don't match into that specialty in the military, in any military hospital, but you do match into a civilian site, then you can still do that specialty if it's Army sponsored for that year. All right. And the good thing about it is that because it's Army sponsored, your pay will generally be much higher because you're getting paid at that of a captain with the BAH and the BAS and like all the benefits instead of just as a resident of the hospital like your civilian counterparts. So that's definitely a plus, but obviously to balance that out, or your obligation kind of increases, right? So that's kind of the debate, if you will, that you need to have with yourself if it's worth it for you or not. But that's on an individual basis. Now just make sure, so every year, and just kind of reiterate it, every year they do change the specialties that they will Army sponsor for that year. All right, that kind of differs based on like the shortages and numbers and everything, but you'll know about it by end of June. So that's kind of like what I have for you in terms of the Army or military HPSP match process. It's a little bit different. I think it's a little bit easier, simpler than the civilian, like ERAS and everything. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully I cleared up some confusion. Please let me know if you have any questions, and best of luck to you if you're in med school or you're about to go into the match process, or whichever stage you are in. Good luck to you, and thank you. Bye.